Hey everybody, welcome back to my back porch, and thank you to the 12 people who've watched my videos thus far. Of course, I'm not really in it for the views. A little bit about me before I go on. If you've never seen my videos, or maybe I should give a little personal history. I'm actually a commercial exterminator, and I'm self-employed, but I've had an interest and love of ancient history, and especially Egyptology, since I was about 4. Um, like literally fascinated by ancient religion, ancient history, ancient Egypt. To give you an example, this book I've had since I was in 3rd grade. I have both volumes. Okay, these are not easy reads. Okay, and I read them in 3rd grade. I'm seriously nuts about this stuff. But I never went forth with going to college. I did get accepted, and something happened. I couldn't get any financing for it other than to go into debt. And the problem with this line of work is generally the best you could ever hope to be as a history teacher. Usually museum curators have to die before their positions open. You really have to stand out in something to get any funding to do any research work, or you working at the universities, and that's not really the life I wanted to lead. And as the great George Carlin said, hobbies cost money, interests are free. I decided to keep it an interest, and this way I could just absorb everything and get on with my life and make some real money. Now, had I known at the time that I could have gone into debt for a degree in this and gone into the History Channel and just talked about how aliens did everything and probably made a decent living, but you can't go back. What I want to talk about today is the deal between Graham Hancock and the mainstream archaeology and their campaign to really destroy and humiliate him and have him taken off the air. Speaking of this, the reason why I'm ranting about this on YouTube is I have nobody else in my life that's interested in this. My family doesn't care. None of my friends care. And when you have nobody to talk to about your interests, I decided, well, I'll just make YouTube videos and hopefully I can find a few people out there that want to discuss this with me. That's all I'm really looking for. But let's delve into it. So, on the eve of the release of the 2nd season and of Ancientapocalypse, and I just saw Graham's video where he was fact-checking Flint Dibble. And I'm thinking about, why is this huge campaign for mainstream archaeology to completely discredit Graham? And lucky for everybody, like I said, I'm self-employed, so when I'm driving around during the day, I get to think about this stuff. And I don't understand it personally. Now, I have minor issues with some of the things that Graham presents as fact. I've discussed them on my channel, but as a whole, there's nothing really wrong with his theory. And it occurred to me, he's getting the nth degree, but other people are getting a pass on this, and I don't know why, and I just didn't think about it. For instance, take my favorite entertainment show that I still watch religiously on the History Channel, the TV show Ancient Aliens, which started off good and strong and presented some good evidence, but in the last 4 or 5 years, they're literally just making stuff up. I still watch it. I'm still entertained by it. But one of their arguments in their letters to Netflix and whatnot is they say that Graham is dangerous because he's presenting this alternative history as fact, and he has an audience that's huge, especially when he goes on Joe Rogan, and they're just going to believe it. Basically, they're going to believe Grant over us. Now, if you ever watched Ancient Aliens, they literally just make stuff up, present it as fact, and they get a pass. For instance, whenever Tsoukalos looks straight into the camera and offends the entire nation of Egypt by saying, basically, there's no way they built these pyramids without the assistance of extraterrestrials. There's no X campaign from the archaeologists. There's no letters to the History Channel that this show needs to be taken off the air. It's dangerous. I wonder, well, why is that? Well, it's probably because when he says something like that, and this is America, he's free to say his opinion, he has absolutely no evidence of this. And the only way he can prove this is if there's only three ways. One is the aliens could show up and pull out their phone and show us the video of them directing the Egyptians to build the pyramids, or they could find a papyrus of aliens in hard hats with plans, or they physically would have to find an extraterrestrial buried in the necropolis. Chances of these three happening could, but practically zero. He's not using mainstream research to have this opinion, okay? He just goes out, looks at the pyramids and says, trusts what other people tell him, and then goes, it must have been aliens. We can kind of look at the Book of Enoch, and if we think real hard and look real hard, maybe this is what happened. But it's not legitimate mainstream research. So he gets a pass. Somehow that's not dangerous with an audience of millions who will take that seriously. Not everybody's like me where I don't take it seriously, but I do like to watch it because on occasion they will make a good point, because the ancient astronaut theory in and of itself I don't have a problem with. Just very hard to prove. On the other hand, with Graham Hancock, he is using mainstream research and drawing conclusions from it. Okay? So he's using legit research from the mainstream community, and he's drawing conclusions, and then he's going out into the field on his own to research it himself. He's a journalist, okay? So he's going to have his source materials, and then he's going to go out into the field. Okay. So in their view, he's taking and perverting facts, which would be dangerous. Well, that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing wrong with reading somebody's research and having an alternative view. I know these are people who've spent their whole life on this. A lot of them have spent a great deal of time, blood, sweat, and tears getting a PhD and specializing in a certain field. So they go out and they do all this research, they draw their own conclusions, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, I saw what your research said, but what if? And then, they get so close-minded. How dare you? And are they guilty of doing things like this, of just wanting to die on a hill, or just never wanting somebody else to bring an alternative viewpoint? Yeah, I can give you an example of this. If you look at the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, and this is big alternative history controversy, and I'll tell you why. They wonder how the granite was excavated out at Aswan. So you have this unfinished obelisk, and they found these stone diorite balls. And Egyptology said, oh, well, they were taking these balls and they were pounding the granite like a hammer. Okay? And then somebody comes along and says, but it looks like the marks looked like some sort of scooping mechanism. Okay? And I look at it and go, I know exactly what they were doing, because I've done manual labor and cut stone and rock in my heyday. That's not pounding. That's a grinding action. So the way those are, they were grinding it. Well, why were they grinding with those balls? One, it's more efficient. Pounding it with a diorite ball, you can't be efficient. You can't be accurate. They're grinding it. And anybody who's worked with a concrete saw or stone saw knows they're not really saws. What they do is it's actually grinding wheel. Okay, you can't saw, but you can grind precisely, and that's what they are. So, but to this day, you go to Aswan and they will sit there and make you pound with these balls. And basically, what they're saying is, if I say no, there's no way in hell they were pounding with it. That's not even efficient, but it clearly looks like they were using a grinding action. No, they were pounding it. So basically, they're telling me, I'm stupid, a guy who might know what he's talking about. I'm stupid, and not only am I stupid, so were the ancient Egyptians. As if they wouldn't figure out that that was more efficient than pounding it with a diorite ball. Okay? So then we get to the point where you have a guy like me who's not just a passing interest. I read the magazines, I buy the books. I have Graham Hancock books, both in print and in audiobooks. He's been on the scene since I was a teenager. It's interesting to me. I can go through it and see, hey, this sounds legit. I can get, makes perfect sense. And then I have my issues with him, okay, where he goes on Joe Rogan, he's going on fine, and then he'll say something, just one little fact that's completely and factually wrong. He'll say it as gospel, and people just take it as gospel, and it does pass on. I see it. Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm a commercial exterminator with a YouTube channel with no viewers. He's never going to speak to me. He's never going to see this video. How am I supposed to go to Grant and go, Grant, hey, look, let me prove to you. Here's the facts. Here's evidence you can physically go and see that proves what you said wrong. It's a minor thing. If you just see this and say, oh, okay, that is wrong, it doesn't detract from anything. But every time he says it, it irks me. So I have to depend on people who have paid for their credentials or have large audiences, they're educators, and he's asked people to debate him. Well, what happens is these people, professionals, will hear his, whether or not they actually read what he wrote, I don't know. But if they hear the information, they just automatically go, well, that doesn't jive with what I know. And then he'll say that one little fact, and then they just go, oh, well, he's crazy. And then they don't even engage. That seems like an unprofessional thing for me to do. So like I said, I have to depend on mainstream known people to engage with him and maybe bring this up. And I don't think they want to engage with him because, like I said, you have to, in order to debate Graham, you kind of only have to debate one thing at a time. You can't do the whole thing because too many people are specialists. So they bring on the, Flint Dibble for a debate. But real quick, how there are some professionals who will engage with this and they'll deal with it in a very professional way. Just real quick, I'll give an example. There's Dr. Bob Breyer. He's known as Mr. Mummy. He's a noted Egyptologist and a doctor of philosophy and a specialist on Egyptian mummies. The man actually mummified somebody to see how they did it. Smart guy. And one time he was on George Norrie talking about ancient Egypt, and George asked him about ancient aliens in the pyramids. And instead of going off on some tangent or trying to prove, he said one thing, and it was genius because it actually stuck with me at the time. It spoke to me as an amateur. He said, well, George, here's the thing. Most of these people that talk about this can't read hieroglyphs. And that stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, he's probably right. So basically, not so many words he's saying. They're just taking things at face value, but they can't read the source material. When you have to stress somebody else to tell you something, there's a danger in that. So I took it upon myself to kind of learn hieroglyphs. I'm not exactly fluent, but I could stumble through it if you need to. I know enough to where if I'm watching some TV show or something and somebody says, oh, you know what this says, and I can look at it and go, that can't possibly say that, which has happened before. I don't want to go into it. But that's a very professional way to do it. He didn't trash him, per se, but then he kind of spoke to the amateurs and said, hey, let me tell you something. These guys, they're doing the research, but they can't read the source material. If you can read the source material, you'll have a better understanding of what's going on. And that does happen. So then, watch, every time Graham's on Joe Rogan, I got to watch it, listen to it. I heard about the Flint Dibble debate where Flint said, I'll come out and talk to Graham. And I know who Flint is. He is a archaeologist. He's a specialist in ancient agriculture, primarily seeds and whatnot. So if you're on a dig and you need a specialist on agriculture in ancient times, he's the guy you call. Obviously not an idiot. So I got excited and said, okay, here's a pro, and maybe he's going to go and talk to Graham and hash this out, and maybe I can have some of my questions answered. Like I said, I have to depend on somebody else. Graham never going to talk to me. He's never going to see my videos. And I watched that Flint Dibble debate, and about 15 minutes in, I'm like, what the heck is going on? Because previously I was like, Flint's one of the guys I'd want to talk to and get a little bit of an education about ancient agriculture. Not anymore. I actually watched it on YouTube. So what the history debunking guy, what Graham had talked about, I actually caught where he had shown something on there, and it wasn't exactly what he was talking about. So I like the ice cores. It was only during the medieval ages, and then he talks about, but he didn't present that evidence. So I thought that was a little weird. And then he goes into this thing about shipwrecks and everything, and just in this arrogant statement that basically we already know everything. There's no possibility that you're right, Graham. Well, how's that possible? We've only been engaged in modern archaeology and research for maybe tops 150 years. If you count Napoleon, maybe longer with Egypt, but really, we haven't been able to do carbon dating and GPR and stuff until very recently. They haven't excavated the entire Earth. There's no possible way that you can say, we know everything and you're wrong. And that stuck with me. Why would he say that? And then the charge of racism came up. I'll get to that in a minute. But at the end of that, where I thought this might be really cool for somebody like me to watch a pro talk to Graham, I came off of it thinking, this guy Flint is an asshole, and not only that, he just made the entire field look like assholes. Okay? What the hell is going on? And then the whole deal with the racism. First of all, Flint, coming from the field that you do, you have to remember that Grant, as he has pointed out so many times, and that I pointed out, is using your data for his books. He is using your data. He is quoting your celebrated professionals. The point is, if you are going to make the charge of racism, you need to clean your own house first, because especially Egyptology in the 18th and 19th century and archaeology has been proven historically racist through that time, and they've been trying to clean it up, but they still don't acknowledge it. Making the charge of racism to discredit somebody in general in this day and age means you're losing. That's basically having a legitimate debate and then figuring you won because you went F you. Okay? Clean your own house first. He is using your data, which means the data he got was from your people. He didn't come up with that on his own, and he never made any blatantly racist statements. So whatever you're charging racist, as Grant pointed out, came from your people, not him. So, in a nutshell, why are they doing this? Why is Graham getting the nth degree, but shows like Ancient Aliens and things like that, virtually nothing? Remember, as Graham pointed out and I pointed out, he is using their data. And they're going to have to, if they engage with him on their data, they have to prove him wrong using their data. And if his conclusions prove his point from their data, that means they have to admit that they don't know everything. And they may be wrong, or they may not have the full story. And for some reason, I don't know why they don't want to just use this line, which is the truth. We don't know. That's all you have to say. There's no evidence for or against at this point. It's an intriguing theory. The burden of proof is actually on Graham, but he's using your own data to prove his point. Okay? And as we know with Göbekli Tepe and other sites around the world, civilization is getting older. So in the vast scheme of 300,000 years of Homo sapien history, what are the chances that no critical thinkers showed up until about 10,000 years ago? I'm sure there were a few. So I think that's what it is. They would literally have to admit that a guy who is not a professional might have a point, or call into question things that they have put out into research as gospel, and especially the racism part. Basically, we need to take that off us and throw it on him. Why? He didn't do anything. It was your people that did it, not him. So anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for listening to my rant. I had loads of fun. Don't be afraid to put some hate in the comments. I love love and I love hate. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I appreciate you stopping by the porch. Hopefully you'll stop by again. And somebody please watch this video about the three objects and the shafts in the pyramid. I think I've got a good idea of what that's all about, but nobody's watched it. I'd love somebody to see it and give me some feedback on that. I appreciate it. Other than that, maybe I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Whoop.